Today on Metcast, we are joined by John Harper of SNY, who's going to give us the lowdown on what is going on with this New York Mets offseason. Plus, we'll be getting to some of your comments and questions, so make sure to stick around on this edition of Metcast. And with that said, welcome to the show, John. Hope all is well. I'm also here with my co-host, Dan Bartels of the New York Post. John, let's get right into it. First off, we got to address the elephant in the room. The Brandon Nimmo trade right off the bat. What do you make of that? The return of Marcus Semien and some of the comments made by Brandon Nimmo, I'm sure you know about them.
Yeah, I think it all depends what happens after this. I mean, on the surface, I kind of like the deal because that contract was going to be a bad contract with Nimmo, 5 more years. You're still taking on a lot of money with Semien, who's been, on the decline the last couple of years offensively. We know he's a good second baseman. So we hear a lot about run prevention and all that. But listen, they need to replace that bat in the lineup and get a bat for the outfield if this trade is going to work now. Otherwise, to me, it's just a case of trying to get out of a contract. So we'll see. I mean, Bellinger's the obvious guy, but I think Nimmo has kind of got to the point where he's not a great outfielder anymore. So I get the move, but you got to replace him now. I just don't think this lineup is good enough. We got to see what happens to Alonso if they get Bellinger, things like that. But I mean, in theory, I like the move, but it all depends on what they do next. What if Stearns is committed to this run prevention and he's not going to go out and get bats to add to this offense? Then I'm not sure it's such a great move.
Yeah, do you think, in your opinion, do you think that move was made to open up left field, or is it more about just getting great up the middle defense?
I think it was. I think he saw an opportunity to get out of a contract that he thought was going to be a bad contract. Nimmo he's had a lot of injuries. I'm not sure he's going to age well in the next 5 years, especially defensively. So I think that was an opportunity. He is bringing on money here, 3 years with Semien, but it's a shorter term deal. And we know he's really good defensively, though. But, I've had this back and forth a little bit on Baseball Night in New York with Sal Licata. He loves the move. But what I was saying to him was McNeil's not terrible defensively. He was okay at second base. So you're getting an upgrade. But it's not like you absolutely had to have a guy that's going to make a difference defensively there. I think it works, but only if we all saw this offense last year, how inconsistent it was. Now you got pieces missing potentially if you don't bring Alonso back. I mean, that would be a big blow. So I have real concerns about. I thought they needed to upgrade this offense. Now Nimmo was still a guy that could give you a decent run offensively. So you're taking a little bit of a step back by bringing on Semien for Nimmo, basically. So I think he needs to do more. Absolutely.
While we're on topic, John, you bring in a second baseman in Marcus Semien. Forget about Brandon Nimmo, right? There's another left-handed bat that might suffer as a result of this, and that's Jeff McNeil. You mentioned him. Do you see him on this team? Because I know David Stearns, when he speaks to the media, he has to kind of put on a show in a way. He's talking up Jeff McNeil, even though he might trade him. Do you see that position versatility factoring into the Mets in 26 with McNeil, or do you not even see him on this team?
It feels like he's on the way out. I have a feeling, and I should have mentioned this earlier. The biggest thing I think I got to give Stearns credit. He was willing to break up the core, which with the Nimmo trade, which I thought was necessary. Because obviously something wasn't working here with this core. They haven't they kind of underachieved in recent years overall. So I like that move to kind of break up the core. I feel like McNeil might be part of that maneuvering here now. He could fill a role with his versatility still as a kind of a utility man second base. He may even end up playing some first base if he stays, if Alonso's not there. We've heard that for potentially potentially McNeil and Vientos, which is not a great combination at first base, but McNeil can fill a lot of roles for you. But it also feels like they want to give more opportunity, have some opportunity for their younger guys, whether it's Acuna, Beatty, even a Jet Williams. We don't know where he's going to play now, especially with Semien at second base. So I think there's still a lot to go on this winter, a lot of moves to be made, a lot of more potential guys moving in a trade. It does feel like to me like maybe McNeil will be on the move too.
I have to agree with you, John. We talk about moves for the Mets. Obviously, the big move was the one they made a couple days ago, bringing in Devin Williams, 3 for $45 with a $6 million signing bonus, 3 for $51. John, do you like the Devin Williams move? And How do you think this relates to now Edwin Diaz in the back end of that bullpen?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like this, the same as Nimmo. What's next? I feel like this works much better if Williams is your setup guy for Diaz. If you go ahead and commit now and bring back Diaz, that's an elite back end of the road, the bullpen. If you got Williams and Diaz, and potentially a guy like Minter, the lefty, coming back with Raley, another lefty, now you got that bullpen pretty well set up. But if you don't bring Diaz back, I got some questions about Devin Williams. I know, he struggled early. We know that last year in the Bronx. His numbers still look good, but if you watch the games, he struggled with walks and just body language. I think a lot of it was mental, trying to live up to the expectations. So you wonder now if he's thrown into the closing role. He got through it at the Yankees and pitched well at the end of the year, but the expectations of following Diaz as the closer there, would that again kind of play with him mentally? So I wonder about that. I think he'd be much more comfortable in a setup role, which is where he was at his best in Milwaukee when Hader was still there. So I feel like that is the move. And I've been told by people in the Mets organization, they still do want to sign Diaz, but I do feel like this gives them a little bit of a reason to draw a line in the sand as far as how much they're willing to pay Diaz. So going to be real interesting. Depends on who else is out there bidding. We know Diaz is the top guy for relievers, so I'm not sure they're going to go all out to get him. That remains to be seen, but I do think they need him. Otherwise, there's still some questions about Williams.
Now, let me ask you this, John, because it's something that I posted on X earlier today. Got a ton of interaction. I really watched David Stern's time in Milwaukee. We all knew he was going to be the president of baseball operations eventually. The rumors were out there for years. But one thing he is known for is when guys are about to turn 30 or are 30, especially pitchers, he typically does not go long term. Look at what he did back then with the haters of the world. It was like a must get out of that. I know they didn't want to pay him, but I also think this is not an unlimited budget. If the Mets are going to go big in left field, add another potential starting pitcher. You already gave, without deferrals, I know there are deferrals, but I'm putting without deferrals, $17 million a year to Williams. I am struggling to see how the Mets, and it's projected, obviously it's projected, so we're not totally sure, but Spot Trek has Edwin Diaz projected at 4 years, $88 million, so $22 million a year. I find it very hard to believe, knowing how David Stearns operates his teams, investing nearly $40 million in just two pitchers out of the bullpen. Yes, a closer and a setup, which would be nice, but he never did that in Milwaukee,
Yeah, he didn't have that kind of money, but I kind of agree with you. That's kind of my gut feeling, is that maybe they're not going to go get Diaz now. They're certainly not going to go all out for him. And I think, we know Stearns, at least it seems like he's all about value, right? And now he got Williams as a closer for a pretty good price. And now if he doesn't have Diaz, now he's got value in that pen, just in terms of the money he's spending. And, is that what drives him? Is that really what his commitment is finding the best value everywhere he can to build a team? He doesn't necessarily have to be that guy in New York, but it seems like that's his mentality. And that's what a lot of Mets fans don't like about him, is he still seems to have a little bit of that Milwaukee mentality. So this offseason is huge for him. That's what I kind of wrote a column the other day saying, basically, with these first two moves, the Nimmo trade and the Williams move, it sort of opened the door potentially to kind of a home run of an off season for him. But that's if he goes out and, and makes big moves to go with it. If he doesn't, it could be a swing and a miss in broad terms. So I'm really interested to see, but I see what you're saying. I kind of feel like he would not want to overpay for a closer like Diaz, for any closer, for a 4 or 5 year guy who's in his 30s. That is kind of his reputation. So it's going to be interesting, because there are other ways to do it. You could go out and spend on maybe a Suarez or maybe even a Fairbanks and pair him in the back of that pen with some of those other guys. But I feel like, Diaz has been a lockdown guy. He's a difference maker. And if you're talking about run prevention, well, there's nothing more important than late inning relief when it comes to run prevention.
Well, that's kind of my thinking. And I'm like, maybe if the Mets sign Diaz, it's a sign that the starting pitching market may be too strong for the New York Mets. Clearly, there's not a crazy ace type pitcher out there, but we can get to Amai. We could touch on that. I know Dan is huge on Amai, and I'm starting to come around here or there, but I have a feeling he's going to end up going out west, like it seems like all the Japanese players have been doing lately. But when you're talking about run prevention, like you said, the back of the bullpen, if the Mets do sign Diaz, could you see that as a sign of, you know what? We're just going to load the heck out of the pen. Hopefully our pitchers can get us to the 6 and then let our dominant pen take over after that. Similar to what the Yankees did a few years ago with Miller, Betances, Chapman. Once you got past the 6, the game was over.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I would say I can't believe they were not going to add to the pitching is because how badly the starting pitching failed them down the stretch. I mean, the injuries were a big part of it. We know that with Senga, Minaya, and then whatever happened with Peterson in the second half, some other guys. So I do think they're going to add to that rotation, but how big are they going to go? I think that's the question. And I wrote something today even about Senga. I mean, do you bring him? Does it make sense to bring him back or trade him? You could save some money by trading him that maybe you could use for a Diaz or another starting pitcher. But on the other hand, he does have high-end potential there. And I did a column where I talked to some other people around the league who feel like maybe the Mets would be best served to keep him just because when you look at what a couple of people raised this point to me. When you look at what the Dodgers did last year, they only had one guy that threw more than 112 innings in the regular season last year because they had so many injuries in starting rotation. But when they got them all healthy at the end of the year, and there was Snell, there was Glasnow, there was Ohtani, as well as Yamamoto, who's the one guy who pitched like 170 some innings. So there are different ways to do it now because it's so much about just getting to the postseason. And if you have enough depth to do that, then you can take a chance with guys who maybe have injury history like a Senga now, because when he's right, he has the potential for dominance. So I don't know. I mean, I'd be tempted to trade him just because he needs that extra day. He does have an injury history now, and he seems to be a little bit quirky about his mechanics. But I can see why it makes sense to hang on to him because I don't think you're getting a lot of value back in return. So I guess that's a long way of saying I do think they still need to make upgrades in their rotation no matter what they do in the bullpen.
Do you think seeing this Dylan Cease contract kind of bolstered Senga's value? You look at 2 years, $15 million a year, and when he's on, and we know it's when, but he's a premium starter. 1.5 ERA first few months of the season last year. We've seen what he could do in the past. Says that he was still injured when he came back, but was trying to fight for the team. Now he's injured every single year. We've seen that, but some people like to blame Pete. Where do you see that? Do you see his value potentially going up from there? Because when you look at what Cease got at 4.5 ERA, $15 million a season for 2 years for a Senga could be an absolute bargain for a team.
It could be. Yes. You could see where maybe a smaller market team especially would really be intrigued by that. But I still don't think even if they're taking on that money, I don't think you're getting an equal value in returns because they know the Mets are going to want to get out from under that money and probably try and do some other things with it. But I was kind of stunned by the Cease money just because he, as you said, he's been really inconsistent. When he's on, he's dominant, but he's been off and on every other year, it seems like. And he's had a lot of struggles. He walks a lot of guys. I was surprised he got 7 years for $210. The Blue Jays, they can afford to do it because they don't actually need him as their top guy. They have Gausman there and the young guy, Savage. So they're really building something there. But I think that if maybe that does set the market, and maybe that convinces the Mets too to even more go harder after a trade for pitching rather than a free agent signing because they do have the pieces to make a trade. Whether it's I know you guys have talked about it. I don't think Skubal's getting traded, but maybe a Joe Ryan, maybe Peralta from Milwaukee, maybe Alcantara, somebody like that. I think the Mets are going to be motivated to explore every opportunity to make a trade there.
Yeah, they definitely have to bolster up this starting rotation, John, no doubt about it. The only thing with Amai was that he wanted to be the only Japanese player on a team. So that was, one, a weird comment, but two, kind of thought, maybe they're trying to trade Senga to bring in Amai. But there is a weird clause in Senga's contract, John, where he gets $100,000 if he wins reliever of the year. I don't foresee that to happen, but it could be something down the line like a Sasaki where, hey, you have these two big price tags in Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz. Maybe you let one go. And maybe you say, hey, I could spend that money elsewhere. It's something definitely to think about. But yeah, the other guy who, of course, we talked about Diaz. Now it's about Pete. And
well, let me just jump in there quickly. I do love the comment from Amai about, hey, I want to be the guy that beats the Dodgers, beats Ohtani, not the guy that goes and joins them like Yamamoto and Sasaki did. So I think if you're especially a team in New York like the Mets or even the Yankees, I think you got to love that, and you say, hey, maybe this is the guy we should go get. So he's an interesting guy from that standpoint. Anyway.
Definitely. And listen, the whole Japanese market, right? Akamoto, Murakami on the offensive side, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But the big piece we're waiting on to see about those other pieces is Pete Alonso. And I don't know how you feel, John. I want to get your opinion. We got it a couple months back, just kind of, seeing what to expect. Now we have the offseason, and there's been no market that has emerged for Pete Alonso as of now. I'd love to get your opinion on that. Why is there no market for building for Pete Alonso, and how does he expect the rest of this offseason to go?
I know. I think it goes back to the same thing we talked about last year. He's first right-handed hitting first baseman in his 30s. Probably won't age well, especially defensively now. I do think the Mets need his bat in that lineup. They lean heavily left-handed now. I think he was really he had a great year. We talked about that. He came through. He was probably maybe their best clutch hitter from start to finish. But I do have major concerns about the defense, and it's not so much about the metrics. I know I hear people talk about the metrics. I think he's okay overall defensively, but that throw-in just scares the heck out of me because we saw it with Senga, and we saw it with he put other pitchers in harm's way. Some of those throws. And I think it's a mental thing as much as anything, whether it's underhanded or overhanded. He just has problems in that area. And that's something that can cost you at any time in a big game. And especially after seeing what a difference Vlad Jr. made with his defense at first base in the postseason. Man, you can see now that can be a difference maker for a team. And it's just hard for me to think that the Mets can win a championship with Alonso playing first base. So as much as I think they need his bat, I think you have to have, and I think you have to need some sort of agreement from him that he's going to at least transition it some slowly, or if not quickly, into it being more of a DH, play some first base, but be a DH. And when you get to the postseason, I think you got to have somebody else playing first base there.
And that was good that his agent, Scott Boras, kind of clarified that at the GM meetings, basically saying, hey, he can be a DH to any 30 teams if you guys want him to be. That's my question to you, John. Say they bring Pete back. Obviously, he leans more in DH, but he's still playing first, I think, some of the time. Like opening day, Pete Alonso is running out to first base. But in those critical postseason games, I agree with you. Do you bring in another defensive specialist at first base? And what's kind of the share of percentage of DH to first base that we can expect for Alonso if he is back?
Yeah, well, that's where a guy like Bellinger would be such a great fit because he can play first, he can play the outfield, he can move around. And so you can split that up with Alonso any way you want. If not, this guy Akamoto is interesting from Japan. He's not the big slugger. That's Murakami. But Murakami's big swing and miss, big power, but also not good defensively. Where Okamoto is supposed to be pretty good defensively there. So, and maybe that works. Think he's a left-handed hitter, right? So maybe that works with Alonso as well. Otherwise, there aren't a lot of obvious options in that sense. That's where, I think actually McNeil probably could be a pretty good first baseman if he's just in some sort of situation there with Alonso. But it's ideally Bellinger is the best fit. But I do think they have to have that in their plans because I just don't, if you're the Mets, I just don't think you want Alonso, especially as much as Stearns talks about run prevention. He has to see that with Alonso and just can't want him in there in the big games.
John, now you know what's interesting? I read through a lot of our members' comments, guys, and you want to get your comments read. Make sure, especially if you're members, get them in now. Jim was saying over here, and I could not agree with it more. He says, how do we replace 200 plus runs of production after dropping Nimmo and Pete had 92 and 126? I mean, you could talk run prevention all you want, John, but if you can't, people forget we couldn't score for 2 months.
Yeah.
Like we were losing games 2-1. Felt like every single night when the pitching was on, it was like that. And I'm like, right now, if Pete walks, John, what is the backup plan? I mean, yeah, it's nice to say Murakami. Murakami's got a 120 OPS against 93 miles an hour plus, which you don't see in Japan. And everybody throws that here in the States. So I'm not convinced he's going to come in and all of a sudden hit 35 bombs. When you look at the market, there's really nothing there. And then you hear also Mark Vientos' comments this offseason. Right now, the Mets have him splitting time defensively at first and third, where I think in the grand scheme of things, I don't think Mark Vientos should be here. But I guess that's time for another conversation. I don't see them going out and getting Tucker. And even if you bring in Bellinger, he still scares the you-know-what out of me. John, when we look at his splits home and away, it's scary. The guy's got a 900-plus OPS at home, and on the road, it was like 715, like low 700s. And I told Dan, I said, we're going to pull this up for you guys in the future. I don't have it right now, so excuse me for not being prepared. I would love to see how many of the doubles and home runs he hit at Yankee Stadium would be doubles and home runs considered in other ballparks. Because when you see that big of a disparity, Citi Field it's deep in the valleys. It's a wall scraper at Yankee Stadium, even 3 or 4 rows back, is a pop fly out at Citi Field, especially early on when the ball doesn't carry the first couple months. It's just, where do they pivot? What is the pivot there, John?
Hey, those are all good points. And Bellinger, he's not a guy that's going to come in and save your offense. He's not that guy, but he's become a very good 2-strike hitter. I think he had the highest average of left-handed hitters against left-handed pitching. So he hits left-handed pitching, and he puts the ball in play. Those splits do have to give you some pause. I mean, Yankee Stadium obviously was perfect for him. But I just love the way he's a baseball player. He runs the bases really well. The defense, we talked about that. But that doesn't address what you're saying. That's why Alonso, to me, feels like he's so important. If they lose him after trading Nimmo, they got a huge hole in the middle of that lineup, especially in terms of protecting Soto and everything else. So I wouldn't want Murakami, as I mentioned before. I think Okamoto's a better fit. He's not the big power guy, but he's more of a 300-type hitter. And he's a better defender, so he could maybe be the guy to replace Alonso if Alonso's gone. But then you're weaker offensively. And as you said, we saw this offense go through periods where they just didn't score runs. So they'd have to find ways to supplement the offense. I do think they're kind of looking at Carson Bench, saying at some point next year he comes along and he's a guy that people love his bat. Scouts love his bat, his advanced approach at the plate. So he could be a guy. There's no room for Jet Williams right now. So, I don't know what you're
not Jet, John. The only player I've had on the podcast. We're going to trade him right after I interview him, John.
So listen, they got major holes to fill if they don't bring Alonso back, and there's no obvious way to do it. Ryan O'Hearn's not necessarily the answer at first base either. So I just
seen that name come up a lot actually in our chat right now as we're talking.
O'Hearn?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's okay, but he's not going to be, you're not as good offensively as you were last year, and they need to be better, I think, than they were last year. So I know they're going to be better defensively, and you should be better pitching wise, but we saw them struggle with the bats, and that could be a problem again.
John, we got a super chat here and a question for you from BG the Kid checking in. You mentioned the name before. Any Mets interest in Munetaka Murakami? He's a big slugger, swing and miss, as you said. Could you see, Vientos in the mix, Murakami, or McNeil kind of piecing together in the absence of Pete Alonso?
Well, from what I've heard about him, it's just not a good fix. As you mentioned, not great against high velocity fastballs, a lot of swing and miss, and not good defensively either. So the other guy, that's where I feel like Okamoto is a better fit. Murakami's got to be tempting because he does have big power, but when you hear everything else about him, it feels like that's not necessarily a guy you would trust coming over to, because there's so much higher velocity on a regular basis in the major leagues compared to the Japanese baseball. That could be a real issue for him.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and then we followed up. John, thanks so much. John says, who's most likely to get traded next, John? I mean, personally, for me, I think it's Jeff McNeil. And I have a hot take for you, but I want to get your question on this. So I was throwing it by Dan today. A bold prediction that I have.
Okay. Well, I mentioned McNeil before, but he's not the guy that's going to bring you back if you're going to get a starting pitcher. So I think they'd have to dip into that farm system for maybe a Jet Williams, or maybe one of the pitchers, Sproat or Tong, to go with and build a package for a Joe Ryan, for a Peralta, for an Alcantara, somebody like that. I think those are the guys that are going to be traded. Maybe if a team, the Twins probably aren't looking to win next year, but if a team is still trying to win next year, and maybe the Marlins are trying to win, maybe they would want Peterson back and hope that he bounces back, or bring Peterson in a trade. Maybe he bounces back to his first half form last year. A lot of ways the Mets could do it, but they're going to have to give up a package some of their top prospects, because that's what they've done. They've been building to this point for the last few years, where they have the depth in their system to make a trade like this. I think now's the time to do it, especially now that you essentially blocked Jet Williams at second base.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's what I was talking with Dan today. Here's my bold prediction. Well, I don't say bold prediction, but I think this player is going to get moved. I think he is a David Stearns type player. Talk about defense, and it also allows the Mets to free up to do something else. But I look across at St. Louis. They're moving heaven and earth right now, John, to try to get out from underneath that Nolan Arenado contract. And I'm not saying I want him, but when you want to talk about a platinum glove, you would have gold gloves pretty much all over the infield. Lindor, you'd have Arenado, you'd have Semien. This infield defense will look crazy different. You look at the 2 years left, about $30 million, a little over $32 million. Maybe you say you'll take him back and you convince him to give him a prospect as well, considering they're just trying to get rid of this contract. His defensive metrics, he's still in the 81st percentile on defense. And then what it potentially allows the Mets to do is someone who actually does have value. If you're shopping to get, and I see it a lot in the chat, a Pablo Lopez, a Joe Ryan, that type of pitcher who we've seen the report earlier today, how the Twins are trying to get out from money because they're leaking like a sieve, supposedly. They might consider moving one of these pitchers. Brett Beatty's got a ton of value, in my opinion. 25 years old, really came on in the second half, hit when nobody else was hitting down the stretch in August. You kind of, you bring in Arenado, it frees up Beatty to be moved. Maybe you get one of these pitchers, and that still allows you to spend on Pete and a left fielder, considering Arenado's only making $15 million. Could you see a potential where you're like, you know what, Kodai Senga, Brett Beatty, and another lower level prospect to get one of these pitchers? It allows them to supplement their pitching. Senga has 2 years left, so when he's on, he's on. We both agree with that. Beatty's still promising after what he did in the second half last year. Give him an opportunity to play full time there in Minnesota. I think that kind of plan kind of makes sense in my head. Maybe it doesn't in yours. I would love to get your take on that.
Well, if you can pull all those pieces together, I think it could make sense. But I don't know, man. That's a risky going out and getting Arenado. I don't think he's got a whole lot left offensively. He still has a good glove, as you said. But that's if that somehow plays into saving money, and for Pete, maybe that works. But otherwise, I'm not sure. If it comes down to that, and this would probably be separate from a Alonso thing, but you could also go out and get Bregman and play third base. It's going to cost you money, but it's not going to. And then you still have to make a trade of prospects for pitching. But he would fill a hole there, and he would give you a better offensively, better bat than Arenado. So I don't know. I mean, you're right. The Cardinals are desperate to get out from under that contract, so you're not going to have to give up anything. But you are bringing on pretty significant money, and he just doesn't look like he adds a lot offensively at this point.
John, we talk about trading for a platinum glove in Arenado. How about trading for another platinum glove in Fernando Tatis Jr.? Is that something Mets fans can expect? Is there a likelihood there? And how could you see the outfield shaping up in 26, regardless of Tatis? Do you like Soto in right? Do you like him in left, especially in the absence of Nimmo?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice idea, I think, in some ways, because he does give you a Gold Glove defense. Yeah, as you said, platinum defense. In right field, he's such a great athlete. But, man, that 9 years, that's a major commitment, too. And you know what? When you look at his numbers, he's still a good player, but he's not the superstar we thought he was going to be since the PED stuff. You know, he's put up good numbers since then, but not like he was before that. So I worry a little bit about that. That's a major commitment. And if you're going to make that kind of commitment, yeah, I mean, you are upgrading defense. But then I would just go pay Alonso, go pay Bellinger, go pay Tucker, somebody like that. I don't want 9 years on the books because you already have Soto for a long period. You have Lindor still for a long period. So I'd be a little bit worried really about clogging up the whole field with those long-term deals.
Do you see Soto in right field next year?
I think so. I mean, I think he could move to left. City field, probably left field might be a little easier to play left than right because it seems a little smaller. But I don't know if he'd be comfortable with that. You know, he's not great, but I know there's a lot of talk too about him and the problems defensively, but I tell you, I watched just about every game, and I didn't think he was a huge problem out there. I know, again, the metrics aren't great, but when you watch him play, he's very sure-handed. Anything he gets to, he catches. He doesn't always take great routes. We know that. But I can't remember more than maybe a few games where he really had a really bad route and maybe cost you a game. He also charges balls really hard on ground balls to singles to the right field. Comes up throwing. He's got a pretty good arm, pretty accurate. So I don't think he's killing you out there. I think you can live with him there for a few more years before maybe he has to become a DH. So I'm not that worried about that. I probably wouldn't move him unless I absolutely had to. I mean, listen, if you get Tucker and he's more comfortable in right, then I think Soto would be okay moving to left. But I think ideally I'd like to leave him there.
Now we have this really quick before we get to our next topic. Juan, thanks so much. You guys don't have to do this, by the way. Just become members, and I'll get to you. But we appreciate that so much. Obviously, you cut the line. His idea, John, trade for Jared Duran, a player that we heard potentially linked to the Mets last year. Pete and Diaz stay, Valdez and Lopez, and bring up Clifford to play first. I think Clifford would be a little later on in the year, but what are your thoughts on that? Thanks again, Juan.
Wait, you lost me a little bit there. Duran and who?
So he's saying trade for Duran, you keep Pete and Diaz, you sign Valdez, I assume trade for Lopez. So you'd be trading for Duran and Lopez and retaining Pete and Diaz, and then eventually bring up Ryan Clifford to play first, which I think there's a reason why he's here and they valued him so much at the trade deadline, John. Maybe you feel differently, but here, I'll leave it up on the screen so you could see it while you're responding.
Okay, yeah. I think we need to see more from Clifford. He hasn't done a lot in AAA yet, but he does have a lot of power potential there. Left-handed bat. That's a lot. Those are two big trades, though. Going out and getting Duran and Pablo Lopez. That's a lot to give up. I'm not sure they have the pieces to get both of those guys. I mean, they do, but now you're really dipping into your system in terms of that. So that fills holes for sure. Duran's going to give you some offense. And you add Lopez and Valdez to that rotation, now you're talking. So now you have a lot of flexibility. And theoretically, I like those moves. I'm just not sure they'd be willing to make both of those trades and give up as many prospects or major league ready players as it would take.
While we're on the topic, quick, John, I just want to get your quick opinion. With the winter meetings coming up, is there a likelihood that Tarik Skubal gets dealt? And would the Mets be in line there? Which I assume they would be, but.
I think they have to be first in line. I did a story on this pretty early in the off season, talking to people who were familiar with the situation in Detroit, just feeling like there's so much pressure on that Detroit front office and the ownership especially to keep Skubal and go for it next year. They haven't won a World Series since '84, so 40 plus years like the Mets, and they have theoretically they have an opportunity. They would have to beef up some of the rest of their team. But if you keep Skubal, you do have a chance. And, the owner there is Christopher Ilitch. He's the son of the late Mike Ilitch, who really used to spend kind of like the Steinbrenners or George Steinbrenner. It would spent more than that Tiger team you would think would afford. But since he died, Christopher Ilitch doesn't spend that way. So he's not the most popular guy in town. There's a lot of people out there that feel like, they'd be showing up at the gates with pitchforks and whatever to run him out of town. So I have a feeling they're not going to trade him, but if they do, the Mets have every piece to go get him. The only guy I'm not trading is who?
McLean?
McLean, yeah.
You would trade Benj?
I'm trying to hold on to Benj too, but if I absolutely had to for Skubal, I mean, I hate to do it for 1 year.
I don't know, John. 1 year.
I know. I probably
1 year, then the lockout. Now he's 31. You're going to pay him a 10-year contract. You know what I mean? That's my biggest fear because Stearns is not doing it. Like, what are we?
I know. If you're talking Skeens, it's a different story because you got him under control for 4 years.
Of course, but it would be Benj plus, because look at every team that would get involved, Let me ask you this. What do you think it would take to get a Jared Duran? Obviously, we're friends with a lot of Red Sox people. They're all, send me Carson Benj. I'm like, you guys are, whatever you're on, I want a little bit of that too. But what do you honestly think it would take? Because Durant's defense is up there. His OPS is, he could be the prototypical leadoff hitter that I've been screaming for 2 years now, because, John, if we're being real, Francisco Lindor's not making $32 million a year to be a run producer, not a leadoff hitter. And, if you had Duran, Lindor, Soto, Alonso 4, and potential Bellinger 5, I don't know if they would ever do something like that, but, to lengthen that lineup a little bit, because Pete Alonso should not be a 3-hitter, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. As far as Duran goes, I'm not sure they match up, because the Red Sox, they have a lot of good young position players. The reason Duran might be available is because they have a lot of outfield. They have surplus in the outfield. So what do they need? You would think they would need pitching, but they just got Sonny Gray, and they have some other pitchers now that fit into that rotation. But, I mean, I'm not sure the Mets have the pieces they would be looking for, pitching-wise and whatever else. Maybe they would want one of the young Mets pitchers. Maybe that would get it done. But if I'm in the Mets, I'm not sure Duran, is he the guy you want to give up a Tong or a Sproat for as part of a package? I'm not sure that I think you're better off trying to use that for a high-end pitcher than a position player. But again, it all comes back to what else they do this offseason, because they do need to find a bat like that in some way.
Definitely. I wanted to get your quick thoughts, just transitioning away from the trade market for a second, free agency for a second. There was a report from Mike Puma this past week about the Mets clubhouse and just, issues in the past, and between McNeil, Lindor, Soto and Lindor not having the best relationship. Do you put any stock in that, or do you think winning is the best deodorant at the end of the day and it cures all?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can win with, even if guys don't love each other in a clubhouse. There was clearly something going on early in the year. We saw Soto. He just didn't look comfortable. We talked a lot about the body language wasn't the same as he went with the Yankees and all that. But as the year went on, he looked a lot more comfortable. It was interesting that later in the year, he came out and basically called Marte the leader of the team.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if there's a little bit, I don't know, it didn't look like friction, but maybe they just, Soto and, I think this story, Puma's story said they're basically two different people. Well, okay, if that's the case, they can certainly coexist. The McNeil thing is a little bit different because they've banged heads a couple of times now over the years. We know that with certain situations, but it's it's interesting because Nimmo I think he was part of that leadership in there. And I've heard for a while that Lindor wants to be the guy. I think that's part of it. And whether or not people think he tries a little bit too hard to be that guy, maybe that rubs some people the wrong way. But listen, I don't think that's why they didn't win. I think there were a lot of issues. I think it was more about just not producing. But you got a guy like Semien coming in now who has a great reputation as a leader, a no nonsense guy. Maybe that plays into it as well. But I would think that Mets brass is at least going to take notice of that story and try and make sure that they're really they got their hands on the pulse of that locker room for sure. That's some of that falls on Mendoza as well.
It does. I agree.
John, we were talking about fans that would show up with pitchforks. If the New York Mets lure Cody Bellinger to Queens, what are the Yankees going to do? I mean, I hate to ask any questions about the Yankees, but I mean, you want to talk about a fan group who'll be angry at Hal Steinbrenner and those, you know what I mean? It's like, what would then happen? What would happen then? You have, and he's going to be here for what, 7 or 8 years if he does sign. So for the next decade, you're going to have, potentially Bellinger and Soto in the outfield, which I'm not opposed to. I think you would agree with me. The best options for the New York Mets is to retain Pete and bring in Bellinger, because defensively it works. Long-term wise, it works with the DH role, which I don't like. I'm with you. I think Pete will be able to play first base the next few years. Full-time basis, probably not. But I would tell him this offseason, you better be throwing 1,000 pitches to a pitcher running the first. I don't care if it's your dad, your brother, your sister. You better have them running from a mound to first base. You better hit him in the chest every time, because we can't have somebody get hurt because of him. But think about what the possibilities are. Anybody gets injured in the outfield, you can move from the center to right. Pete gets hurt, you move him to first base. I mean, for me, it's a complete win-win, and think about what it could do to this lineup. If Carson Bench or Jet Williams, dare I say, which probably not, but what if one of them turns out to be the real deal, and they could be, Jet Williams steals 60 bags down in the minors, projects to be a speed demon up here, real high IQ player. And it's not just because I interviewed him. When you hear him talk, he knows the game so well. He's like one of those guys who he focuses on the pitchers. He knows everything about the strike zone. And that's what I like about him. He's like a prototypical leadoff guy, which I actually think, John, he might get the first chance before Benj, but that's for another day.
Well, where's he playing? Where's he playing though?
Center field. See, John didn't look at my interview. Look at what is this? No, I'm just kidding, John. He told me they have him playing center field, left field, and right field this entire offseason. He's been working out with, although it's an infielder, but he's been working out with Alex Bregman. He said it live on my thing. But he said the Mets were giving him advanced metrics and statistics on his jump that he's been getting in the outfield, and they wanted him to work specifically on that in center field this offseason. So clearly they have a vision for him. And I'm thinking maybe he takes over the Jeff McNeil if he's move type. He could play third, second, short, left, right, center. He could play all over. He said, I'm playing all over the place except for first and catcher. That's what they've been having him do. So I'm thinking long term, get a real leadoff hitter in here. And that'll lead me to my next point, which I'm angry about seeing this report today. But you get a guy like that, Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Bellinger, all of a sudden is Alonso's protection, something he's never had. This lineup gets crazy long.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. He's athletic enough, Williams, for sure. I got to see it, though, because I've seen that over the years, especially with the Mets. They've tried to convert infielders to outfield. It doesn't always work. I mean, I remember Hojo tried it. Keith Miller, this going way back, Keith Miller tried it. Even a couple, I can't remember. There's a couple other guys. But theoretically, it could work because he's certainly athletic enough to do it. As far as the Bellinger thing, I mean, when you go back to the whole Yankee thing, I mean, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hal Steinbrenner crying poor last week when he had his press session. I mean, the Yankees make more money than anybody, and he's worried about whatever he has to pay to the city. I mean, come on, Yankee fans don't want to hear that. Listen, if they do lose Bellinger, it's gonna be hard for them. I mean, unless if they go out and sign Tucker, all's good, I'm sure, in Yankee land. But Tucker's going to be he's a huge commitment that I don't think Hal Steinbrenner wants to make. So there's a ton of pressure on them to sign Bellinger. It sounds like he really liked it there. He's got the connection with his father, having played there. Sounds like he wants to go back, which again could make it tougher on the Mets. And it comes back to the same thing. What do they do if they don't sign him? So there are so many pieces in play this winter between both teams. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and John, look, there's a rumor out there today, I'll say it, because I have not been able to confirm it via my reporting, so I don't want to say it out there, but I said it to you last time you were here. If the Mets go out and trade for Luis Robert Jr., I will end my podcast because I will be so anti-David Stearns, you won't find anybody else more anti. John, that cannot happen. I don't care about his split. He had 230, 15 home runs, 14 home runs. His on-base percentage was under 300. And I get it. He's a defensive wizard. But we already have that in Tyrone Taylor.
Yeah.
What are you going to $20 million? You could potentially the rumor today was that the Mets have been in contact with the White Sox in regard to him. There's no deal imminent, but it's definitely an interest out there. $20 million. You can't find, I mean, Cody Bellinger is going to get what? 27, 28?
Yeah.
He's going to touch 30. So for a few more $1 million, you get a player that is exponentially better. In my opinion, John, they cannot touch this guy.
Yeah. I mean, I know he's had his moments offensively over the years, but he's been really inconsistent. So that doesn't really address the need for offense. He's a good center fielder, but I'm not sure that works. I think there's better ways to, especially if you do think Benj or Williams could be the guy, you're not necessarily bringing Robert in to play that position as well. So I mean, I think Stearns is probably, he's doing his due diligence on everybody that's out there, but I'd be surprised if they went and got him at this point.
John, what's your most glaring need for the New York Mets right now?
It's tough because I do think right off the bat, I'd say starting pitching. They got to get at least one high front of the rotation starter because you can't go back. I mean, I do think there's a potential for depth next year and a bounce back from guys like Senga, Peterson, Manaea, but you can't go into next year counting on that after what happened this past year. you got to get at least one guy, ideally two, and maybe you can make deals from there to bolster that rotation. But at the same time, if you go ahead and do that and you don't bring back Alonso, then we're right back to what we're talking about the offense. I don't think they have enough offense to win. Run prevention is great, but not when you're dying for runs to score runs on a nightly basis. So I'd have to say starting pitching first, but I think the offense, you can't ignore the offense at this point, especially after trading Nimmo.
Completely agree.
Now, John, since I last had you on, the rumor out there, and it was reported by The Athletic over in Minnesota, that for the right team, right contending team, Byron Buxton may be willing to waive that no trade clause. What are your thoughts on him potentially? Maybe you throw him in a package with a pitcher and you give up a haul. What do you think about that?
Maybe. He's an interesting guy. He's certainly got all the tools and the ability, but he's been hurt a lot in his career. I'd be a little bit worried about that. And I know he's got, I think 2 or 3 years left on his contract. And I think that's where,
3 years, $15 million per.
Yeah, it's not, it's not bad money wise, but I don't know. I think the Mets love this idea of Benj and maybe Williams both in the outfield. So I think they want to kind of keep that open as much as they can. But he is, if you ended up getting him and like a Joe Ryan somehow and gave up a major package, that would be impactful for sure.
That would solve a lot of problems for the Mets.
Yeah,
a lot of problems. Real quick, John, for me, just outside of the Mets, the big casino project is taking place. Steve Cohen granted the license, one of 3 licenses. He's going to get his casino. Do you think, A, the casino is a good thing? Just your thoughts on Metropolitan Park. And then B, do you think he's now finally going to take his focus back towards the Mets? And I'm not saying it ever left the Mets, but spending all that money that now it's pretty free. Spent.
Yeah, listen, you got a casino going in there. He's got more millions coming in for sure. I like the idea just because for forever, Citi Field and even Shea Stadium, it's been on an island there. There's nothing for fans to do there. Like a lot of ballparks around the country are in locations where you can go to a restaurant, go do other things, shopping, whatever, right there on the same site. And I think that's what's going to be now for the Mets once this thing goes in. So I think for fans, it's a good thing. Listen, fans want to go in the casino and gamble as well. I'm sure Steve Cohen will be glad to take their money, but I think big picture is good. I really don't believe that that's affected his focus as far as the Mets goes. Look, I'm sure Stearns, from what I've heard, Cohen is very hands-on with his GMs. He's in touch with them on a daily basis, so I'm sure he knows everything that's going on. I'm sure he's letting Stearns, bring a lot of ideas to him and stuff like that. But I don't think he's letting anything happen. He wants to win a championship. He put that out there when he took over this team, and it's already been the 5-year window that he talked about. So I feel like he feels like he's really kind of on the spot now to go ahead and fulfill that promise to Mets fans that he made to bring a championship to Queens, to New York.
Now, John, we heard, and this is the last one for me, we heard about the rumors how the Mets are monitoring the Kyle Schwarber situation. Is that strictly if Pete leaves? Do you see David Stearns clogging up that DH role? Something that we've heard in the last few years, something that he doesn't like to do, and it kind of backfired him with the JD Martinez. What are your thoughts on that?
It's John's guy.
I don't think it works if Alonso stays, just because we talked about Alonso needing to transfer to DH at some point, transition to DH. But you know what? If Alonso, we didn't talk about this. If Alonso leaves, you go get Schwarber to DH, and now you go get another first baseman, maybe that Okamoto or somebody like that. Now you got some offense. Schwarber is a guy that plugs that hole and really gives you. 56 home runs speaks for itself. He can hit left-handed pitching. He does strike out a lot, but that kind of power, that would solve some problems there. I have a hard time believing that the Phillies are going to let him go, especially to the Mets, unless Cohen just blows him out of the water with an offer. And maybe he will if Alonso leaves. Maybe, for 4, probably he's not going to probably need more than 4 years, something like that. Maybe they would do that. That's a guy that that lineup looks a whole lot different. It leaves them really totally left-handed in some ways, but you could live with that for what he's bringing to that lineup.
John, 2 quick ones for me, and then we'll get out of here. The non-tendered list for the Mets. It was Danny Young, Luis Castillo, and Max Kranick. Was there any shocks from the tendered, the guys that got tendered a contract, and then specifically Max Kranick? Did that come as a shock to you that he got non-tendered by the Mets?
A little bit, just because he was so good for them last year, and it does feel like they probably overused him early in the year, threw a lot of multiple inning outings out of the pen. So you kind of feel bad for the guy. We know there's not much loyalty in baseball. Each side is going to do what it has to do. But I kind of wanted to see him get another shot at some point. But I know it looks like he's going to miss the year. So not particularly surprised by that. It's just the nature of the game now. As far as, Danny Young's another, all these, I read somewhere, I think the Mets had more Tommy John cases than anybody last year. So
that's what Adam Ottavino was coming out and saying.
That's right.
Said, how do you explain that? He said, between
I'm
us
not
girls here, he said that Carlos Mendoza has no idea what he's doing when it comes to a bullpen.
But the pushback on that is that he had to go to that pen when his starters were going 3 innings a night. So, if anything, you can put that on Stearns as well for not having enough depth in that pen. But hey, listen, at this point, we've seen it over the years. Injuries happen. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason for who gets hurt and who doesn't. Some of these guys, everybody throws hard now. So maybe it was just one of those years. I thought Mendoza did not have as good a year with the bullpen as he did the year before.
I agree.
But some of that comes down to the choices he had as well. But I do think there is going to be pressure on Mendoza to handle that pen and make better decisions out of the pen overall.
And finally, John, my Mets X Factor player, who I feel like I say every year is going to be this dark horse guy, Francisco Alvarez. Is this finally the year? He gets tendered a contract. He's back. I think that catching tandem with Duran's the Gold Glove finalist, it works. But we need Alvarez to start, being what he was when he came back from AAA last year. Can Met fans expect that from Alvarez to finally put it together in 2026?
This really does feel like this will be the year it tells you what he's all about, because he did, as you said, he made strides after he came back. He looked like a different guy coming back from AAA, so you give him credit for that. He was using the whole field better. He wasn't. There were still moments. I remember him chasing. Well, I think it was Duran from the Phillies chasing badly in the 19th inning against him. But he's going to have those moments. But I think overall he did look like a better hitter. Wasn't swinging out of his shoes as much. But you're right. This is the year, man. He's still not showing you that power that we all thought he was going to have. He had 25 home runs as a rookie. Everybody projected him as a 30-plus home run guy. We really haven't seen that. Maybe the hand injuries have had something to do with that. But this is the year he needs to show it, because he would be such a bonus if they do that, get that kind of offense out of that catching position.
Now, last one for me. I got one last one. We all keep talking about Amai. Are the Mets going to be required, or whoever gets him, going to be required to have a 6-man rotation? I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, I haven't heard as much of an issue. Most of these, we know these Japanese pitchers come over. They only throw basically once a week over there. So, but I didn't think it was as much of an issue with Yamamoto with the Dodgers. So, I guess we'll see. I know the problem is, if Senga is back, he's a guy that he requires extra rest. So that's a problem in itself. The thing is, though, the way these teams are handled now, all these teams are looking to give their guys extra rest with off days anyways. Nobody gets skipped anymore to keep the guys in turn, it doesn't seem like. So really teams they're looking more for it used to be 200 used to be the benchmark, 200 innings. Now it's maybe 150. So I think there's ways to make it work. But if you had 2 guys in that rotation that need an extra day, that could be a problem. So I'm not sure, but I keep going back to that quote. I want to go out and beat the Dodgers. I love that. I'd like to see him in a Met uniform.
Good luck doing that with the Giants. And that's what we got for you guys today. John, thanks so much, guys. If you want to be locked in and have your voice heard live with our guests like John and other guests like BT and crew, who will be having a lot of people coming up, especially with the winter meetings. And hopefully John will come back after the winter meeting sometime before spring training, because we always love his insight. Make sure to click the link in the description. Become a member to be guaranteed to get your voice heard live on our platform. John, thanks so much.
We're done? I thought we were just getting started, guys.
Take it easy, John.
Hey, great being on with you guys.